If your goal is winning the presidency, now you have this dissonant civil war, call it what you will, in the toxic mood in the Republican Party. Establishment guys standing with Paul Ryan saying he's a conservative man of principle, that Trump's the outsider who took over the party, he's the guy who doesn't belong. Trump voters who didn't like the establishment to begin with are saying, Paul Ryan, you disloyal, you finish it for me. And so there's all these conversations now that if this election goes on the path it's currently on, the Republicans are going to lose seats. Trump is going to lose the presidency if it stays on this. Paul Ryan comes back. The moderates are the ones who are going to lose. His supporters are the ones who will get swept out if there's a big Democratic year. And there are some Republicans saying that his job is at risk.
Yeah, I mean, the House dynamics are going to be fascinating. They could potentially even lose the majority. And if they have the majority, it's going to be much less of a margin for Paul Ryan to work with. And it sort of gets back to that point of Trump not necessarily having a strategy. He doesn't have something that he's driving each and every day. And it comes out when people who've met with him, his short attention span. He can't focus on one thing for very long. And you see that with his Twitter account or with these other things where there's not one overarching strategy aimed at Hillary Clinton.
Now, some Republicans who just the other day were saying it's time to dump Trump are now jumping back because their phones are ringing off the hooks in their office because the Trump supporters are very vocal. Deb Fischer, the senator from Nebraska, the Republican Senate candidate Darrell Glenn out in Colorado. Now they're saying, never mind, didn't mean it, never mind, because of this backlash from Trump supporters. But Ryan is holding firm in the position he's in, which is actually a little unclear. He says he won't defend Trump, he won't campaign with Trump, but he hasn't withdrawn his endorsement. Now, on his campaign staff, just about every day, his Hill staff, just about every day puts a video up on the speaker's website. Here's a little snippet from today's.
And the way I say it to young people is, you don't want to just live a good life, you want to lead a good life. And if you want to be able to lead your life, then you want to have a country founded on core principles that allow you to lead your life.
Was that a 2020 ad?
Again, this is recorded. God knows how long ago this was recorded. He does this regularly. But to put this up today in the middle of this, don't just live a good life, but lead a good life? What are we talking about? The Donald Trump tape where he's groping women. Have core principles? Paul Ryan's private criticism of Donald Trump is he has no idea what he really believes in.
He's clearly trying to preserve his own brand as well as the brand of all of the down ballot people who are going to suffer here. John, right after the tape came out, a lot of Republicans started jumping ship, and they thought that that was where the wind was going. And then when the polls came out and said, well, actually, there's only 16%, or maybe it was 13%, thought that they should bail on Trump, Republicans started to come back on that again. So I think that there's going to be a broader reckoning within the Republican Party, for sure, between the Trump wing and the Donald Trump, kind of burned down the House wing. And I think this is the point where we start to ask, is this just Donald Trump meandering all over the place, or is there some kind of a broader strategy? When you pull back the curtain and you look at who is orchestrating a lot of this, Steve Bannon. We have not been following this story or kind of covering enough how much Steve Bannon is really kind of influencing things behind the scenes. And when you talk about that debate, that was all about base thrilling, right? Up to and including what we found out afterward, which was that they tried to orchestrate the former women who had accused Bill Clinton to have a Jerry Springer-like moment on live television. So when you start to look at that, you really question whether the broader strategy is looking at a post-election, some kind of a new Trumpian wing of the Republican Party.
Right. Is it a movement? Is it a TV network? Is it a media? Is it all of the above? We don't really know. But it's a great point because if you look at Breitbart, which is where Steve Bannon comes from, this is what they do. They hit the Clintons every day. They still think that President Obama was born somewhere other than the United States. They just keep hitting this. And if you look at Steve Bannon can do math, though. He can do math. He knows you're not going to win a national election with that strategy. But if you assume we're going to have a post-election where if Trump loses, the Trump people will say, Paul Ryan and the establishment cost us the election by this last month running away. The establishment will say, Trump cost us the election by being crazy and by being erratic and by campaigning like that. And this civil war in the party that we thought would be settled in this election will get even worse as we go forward.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, if you look at 2020, if Trump wins, which is unlikely at this point, if he loses, you imagine that 12 or 15 people will run on the Republican side again. And all of these folks.
Thrills.
Yeah, I talked to somebody about that. I was like, yeah, I can't wait for that to happen. And so you see now people positioning themselves vis-a-vis Donald Trump. How close are they? Ted Cruz at first saying, oh, vote your conscience, then saying, I'm
and endorsing the guy who called his father a presidential assassin and his wife ugly.
Talked about his wife. So, yeah, I mean, I think in some ways, I mean, what the Republicans are doing also is looking at the polls, right? If you look at them jumping ship, partly they're jumping ship because Trump is losing. And you saw that start to show up. He's losing after that first debate. I imagine if he was closer in the polls in some of these swing states, they wouldn't be so quick to separate themselves.
This is something that's come out throughout this discussion. We raised the question of whether Donald Trump really knows what he stands for. Doesn't this all raise the question about whether other Republicans know what they stand for or not, the way that they've jumped around in different places, and whether they have something to be for rather than against or concerned about, which was their problem in the primaries. They couldn't figure out what they were for.
Their voters, the customers, have revolted against what the store is selling. I mean, that's what we've seen in this campaign. The customers want something else. They're showing up to McDonald's and they're not ordering hamburgers. And that's what's happening. But look at this Utah poll. This is stunning to me. Again, this is taken in the middle of all this tape stuff, the Trump groping tape. So polls go wild after a big event like that. We'll see if they settle. But this is the state of Utah.
Yeah.
26% Clinton, 26% Trump, 22% Evan McMullin. Many of you probably don't even know who he is. He's the conservative columnist who eventually agreed to run when conservatives were looking around for a never-Trump candidate. Gary Johnson, the libertarian, at 14%. Now, the Clinton number doesn't stun me. You know, the Democrat will get 26 or 30% in the state of Utah. But the fact that Donald Trump is getting a quarter of the vote in Utah, that Evan McMullin, again at the moment, we'll see where it is in a week or 10 days, but this tells you something about this fracturing in the electorate broadly, but particularly at the moment within the Republican Party.
Yeah, and Gary Johnson there at 14% too. I mean, there is just a sense, especially in Utah, where you saw the immediate aftermath of that tape. Jason Chaffetz, the congressman from Utah, the governor of Utah, Governor Herbert, and you know, Mitt Romney is a registered voter now in Utah. So you have a lot of people in Utah just aghast at the moral irresponsibility of Donald Trump with these tapes. And so I think Utah is a perfect case where everybody's splitting off, and if Donald Trump cannot carry Utah, forget about Florida or Ohio.
Well, Democratic polling shows Clinton up 6 in Georgia right now, again, in the middle of this hurricane about the tape. So we'll see what happens when it settles down. But if Clinton's up 6 at any point in Georgia, you've got a crazy election.